Hi everyone, welcome back from lunch. I know that you're enjoying some incredible food over there, and I'm completely jealous because I have to say that aside from the amazing people at National Conference 2 and getting to talk about things that I think are really helpful, my third favorite thing is probably getting fed 3 delicious meals every day that I did not have to cook myself because while I am probably an okay cook, cooking is not my favorite thing to do. And I really relish when I don't have to do it. So live it up, you guys. Enjoy. And for those of you who might have indulged a little bit too much, I can relate. Um, Feel free to do what you need to do during this session because it's after lunch. Get up, walk around, just stretch a little bit, do what you need to do so that you can stay engaged and present because we've got some good stuff this afternoon for you before you go to Camp Geneva. So this tool that we're covering is the system awareness tool of the Systems Iceberg, and it's the last tool that we're doing today, and it's super versatile, super useful, one of my faves. And let me show you what it is. It's a model. It's a way of going deeper into understanding a system and really being able to dig up those system stories. And so let's look at it. So the iceberg graphic itself, the main idea really is to help you remember that there's things that you see above the waterline, visible on the surface, and then there's a whole bunch of stuff underneath the surface that's much harder to see and identify. And it's the stuff underneath that's driving up the things that you see here. So a lot of times we are just functioning at this level. We are just functioning with what we see with the naked eye and not dealing with the things that are actually going to be transformative for a system, bring it to greater health. And so that's the idea that we want to explore here. Let me share a little bit with you about the parts of the iceberg in the model. So first we have events. And events here is not like your daughter's birthday party or the meeting that you were late for or things like that. It's not something on the calendar. It's more it's a way of saying anything that you can see happening. So for example, an event can be that your son got a B plus on a test. That's an event. Or another event might be that you saw Jamal go up the altar and rededicate his life to Jesus. That is an event. A happening that you saw. And a lot of times these events that when we're talking about them in this context, they're events that you might be asking yourself, oh, I wonder why that happened. So events can be positive and events can be negative. And they're usually apparent to us. And sometimes we think of events as like isolated, one-time things. But sometimes events are actually part of patterns, except that the patterns can be harder to see. Still, though, patterns are something that straddle the waterline because they're patterns that I can see and patterns that are way harder to identify, either because of where I am in relationship to the system or because that thing is just hard to see for everyone. So, for example, an example close to home might be I might see that my daughter or my son is getting straight B's in school. That would be a pattern, right? You can look at the trend of their grades from term to term. That's a pattern. Another pattern that we're following all the time is the COVID line, right? That one's a little harder to see because you have to do a lot of research, like people are doing research and gathering data all over the place so that you can identify that trend. So, but that's another pattern that, has some visibility right now, especially for all of us. Other patterns that may be harder to see, but may be visible from particular vantage points, like let's say, for example, you have a young person who's really having a hard time focusing in school. Every day they're just distracted. That could be a pattern, a trend that's true in their lives. But who is able to identify that and see that and name it, articulate it? So that's the nature of patterns. Some are easy to see, some are harder to see. And then we have this interesting, super important category called structure. Now, structure are things that are part of the system that make things happen as they do. So, for example, in the physical world, right, a structure might be whether something's a sphere or a cube, right? Let's say you needed to roll something down a hill. Would you rather have something that's shaped like a cube or shaped like a sphere? A sphere, right? A ball rolls down the hill really easily because its structure lends itself to that. That dynamic is easy for a rolling thing. Much harder for something that's like got four sides or however many sides that is, and won't roll easily. So structure a lot of times determines behavior, and that's the nature of systems, that the structure of something is going to drive the behavior that you see up towards the top. So structure for us, especially when we're dealing with human systems and social systems like a family or a church or a community or a nation, those kinds of systems, a lot of times structure are things like the law or rules, policies, habits, rituals. Like, for example, um, a structure can be that um, every Sunday I go to church, or every Sunday I don't work. That's something I've built into my system, into my family life, into my community life, that determines patterns of behavior. Because I have a habit, a ritual, a rule that says that I do not go to work on Sunday. I don't do work on Sunday. It determines the kinds of patterns that you're going to see from me on a Sunday. It means that if you try to set up a meeting with me on a Sunday, I'm gonna be like, no, man, can we do it on Monday? Or I might not do chores on Sunday. You might have a pattern of seeing, a very messy kitchen on Sunday because my family is not cleaning that day or something like that. So you see what I'm saying? So the structure determines, like, the rule, the habit, the policy that is part of a system. That's going to determine the kind of behavior that you see. And sometimes structure is physical, like in the case of the sphere. Sometimes it has to do with rules and policies, those kinds of things. And then driving the structure, determining the structure, is something called mental models. Mental models are basically beliefs, things, the way that people feel the world works. So it's what determines the kinds of structures that we build out in the world. So for a good example is, for example, the Sabbath one. So if I have a belief or a strong conviction that rest is needed on Sundays because the Lord decreed it, I'm going to set up structures to operate honoring that belief, right? That, so for example, another mental model is, my boss for many years, one of his beliefs was that, his family time, his time with his wife, was the most important thing, that you need to have regular time with your spouse, date night every week. You just, could not get away from it because it was one of the things that was going to keep your marriage healthy. So he believed that time with your spouse keeps your marriage healthy. So he created a structure for himself where he would always go on a date on Friday nights with his wife. And so that structure was born out of that mental model, out of that belief about how the world works. And driving mental models is something that, in your workbooks, which is workbooks page 35, in your workbooks you have a model like this one, but the bottom of the iceberg is called vision. I'm gonna invite you to use systems intent, because I think it's going to be a little bit clearer, because we're using vision, the word itself, in other ways while we're training this week. And so I think for just to keep the concept straight, I think it's easier for you can use systems intent, you can use the goal of the system or the purpose of the system. So the purpose of the system, let's say a healthy marriage, is going to drive the mental model of, like, okay, I really believe that I need to have intentional, committed time with my spouse every week. I'm going to do it every Friday night. That's my structure. And then we're going to see that carried out in the world. Is it happening with that system in place? So the system's purpose drives mental model structure, patterns, and events. That's when we are doing another important part of the way that this iceberg can be used, which is to design a system. We can design systems. Did you know that? It's awesome. I do it all the time. So when you're trying to design a system, and you want to go in this direction. So you go bottom up to design. So I'll give you an example. Another one. Bottom up to design. Some time ago, somebody gave one of my children, the oldest one, a computer. And in came this piece of technology into my house. And I know how much, screen time is such a big part of our lives. And I have lots of feelings about screen time. And in my family, obviously in our family system, for me, one of the primary purposes, goals of our family system and the ways that we run our household is to ensure that the kids are thriving, that they're developing in fully functional human beings, that they know their spiritual identity in Jesus, so on and so forth. So my intent in my family system is for healthy, fully functional young people who know God. One of the mental models that emerges from that is that they need to be able to have time to spend with God, to spend with each other, to spend reading, to spend learning about the world, to spend doing their schoolwork, all those kinds of things. So I have mental models about how time should be spent for a child in my home, right? And one of the things that's related to that, specifically related to that computer that came in as a gift, is that screen time needs to be really limited because young people need to be trained in how they manage their time. And screens can be something that really suck you in. And so it's like, you don't have the capacity as a small young person to really be able to manage that on your own. So you need structures to help you along, right? So my mental model is screen time needs to be limited because unlimited screen time is not good for you. So then what did I do? I said, okay, we're going to establish some rules about the use of this computer. Some of the rules are, you can't use the computer unless you're all done with schoolwork. You can't use the computer unless you're all done with chores. You can't use the computer unless you've had time in the Word or, something like that. So I had all these policies and rules associated with how the system was going to work in regards to my kid and how they were going to use this tech, right? So then once you set up the design and structure, you're kind of in a, let's see what happens. Let's see what this design of a system created. So, kids, how smart kids are. They don't play. So my son Jacob, he would come home. No. I realized because we live a little bit too far away from school, I actually picked them up from school. We can't get a bus to go from their school to my house. So I pick them up or somebody picks them up and brings them home. And I started seeing this pattern that Jacob would be like feverishly doing homework in the car, trying to get all his homework done. So that by the time he got home, all he had to do was chores. And so then he would fly through his chores and then be like, okay, Mom, I'm done. And I would be able to go through the list of like, okay, so did you do this? Did you do this? Yes, I did all that. And I would give him the computer because I was like, okay, so he did what I said. But there were so the pattern that I thought that was going to develop, which was like, oh, this child's only going to have like an hour screen time because he has so much to do. There's no way that he's going to get all that done. No. That's not what happened because my child sped through everything. So the pattern that emerged was not the pattern that I expected with the design. So what do I do then, right? So you can go back to the iceberg And to diagnose, to troubleshoot what's happening in your system, you go from the top down. So this way to diagnose. So in doing that, I could identify what the pattern was. Okay, my son is getting too much screen time. Why? I started looking at some patterns. I was like, oh, the amount of homework that I thought that he got, nowhere near does he get that amount. No way. So that was like structurally that there's other structures like the homework structure that the teacher is giving him that's interacting with this system that I'm trying to build here. So, and this is what happens with systems, they're interrelating, right? And so the homework system that the teacher's in charge of is not behaving the way that I think it was going to behave. So then I have to bring adjustments to my system. And so you see what I'm saying. So we added other structures, like for example, I basically I set a cap on screen time, which was, that day was like rough for Jacob. God bless him. You all can pray for him, that he could only get, what is it, like 2 hours a day, which is still like, feels like so much to me. But I guess that is not a lot to a lot of kids. Maybe it's a lot to you. In that case, you can always just keep on praying for my family as we sort this out. But you get the idea with the iceberg is that you can look to see what's underneath the surface when you're diagnosing, when the patterns and the events are not as like what you expect. And you'll see some parallels here with the tools that we've used before around where do you have your blind spot? How do you take information from outliers or from things that you did not expect and really incorporate that into your meaning making? And now that I've given you this little tiny example and just the structure of the iceberg and these keys of designing from bottom up and then diagnosing from top down, we're going to give you a little bit of time to workshop this with the penguins and the walruses. And then when you come back, we are going to level up and apply this to a much bigger system. Woo! I can't believe I'm not there doing this with you. Oh my gosh, this is terrible. Okay, have fun.